Hello learners, today we are going to talk about the food chain, food web and the tropic levels. This is under the subheading linkages in nature, and we had already studied about the ecosystem, what an ecosystem is, what are the components of the ecosystem, and what are the type of producers and consumers. So the next part of this unit is what is a food chain, what is a food web, and what are the different tropic levels. So all the organisms in this universe or in this environment or in nature, they are all related to each other. And how are they related? They are all related to each other in terms of food. One is an eater and the other is being eaten. So each of these organisms, they derive their energy from one another. So for example, we have plants. The plants, they are eaten by the herbivores, which are in turn eaten by the carnivores or the predators. And we all know what are herbivores, what are carnivores, which we had already discussed in the previous unit. So the herbivores and the carnivores, they are related to one another through energy, forming a food chain through eater and being eaten. One is the eater and the other is being eaten. So the herbivores eat the plants, they derive their food or they derive their energy by eating the plants. The carnivores, they in turn eat the herbivores or the predators. Then there is a chain, there is a chain or a flow chart that follows the course of the food energy through the ecosystem, and that chain is known as a food chain. So a food chain is a flow chart that follows the course of food energy through the ecosystem. Now, this food chain is divided into two types. One is the grazing food chain and the other is the detritus food chain. The grazing food chain starts with the green plants, while the detritus food chain starts from the dead organic matter, which is consumed by a series of parasites and hyperparasites. So you can see here in this chart the two types of food chain. One that starts with the plants. The plants are being eaten by the rabbits, and the rabbit is in turn eaten by the wolf. In another case, that is in the detritus food chain, now there are the dead remains of plants and animals. The leaves from the trees fall down on the ground. The animals, they die and they rot on the ground. In the forest area, they rot on the soil. So these remains of the dead plants and animals, they are fed by, or the detritus feeders eat, or they consume these dead plants and animals, and these remains of these dead plants and animals, they are again acted by the bacteria and the fungi. So there may be bacteria which are able to digest particles, dead plants and animals. There exists a chain in this whole flowchart. So a link exists between the detritus food chain and the grazing food chain. So in the grazing food chain, as I had already shown in the previous chart also, it starts with the plants, then it is eaten by the rabbits, the plants are eaten by the rabbits, the rabbits are then eaten by the wolf. So the food or the energy is derived right from the plants to the rabbits, then the wolf eats the rabbits and they derive the energy from the wolf derive the energy from the rabbit. Now when these plants die, or when the wolf dies, now there are remains of the wolf also, there are remains of the plants also, dead plants or the twigs and the fallen logs of wood, they fall on the ground, they are present as waste on the soil, and these remains and waste, they are acted upon by the microorganisms. The microorganisms, they may be bacteria also, they may be fungi also. There are certain bacteria and fungi which are able to degrade these organisms or these dead plants and animal remains. Now this is a flow chart showing the food chain. The food chain, a simple food chain starting from the grasses, then the grasshopper, and then the frog, and the snake, and the vulture. The grasses are eaten by the grasshopper, then the grasshopper is eaten by the frogs, the frog is eaten by the snake, and the snake is eaten by the vulture. So there's a eater and there's one being eaten. So the snake is being eaten by the vulture, and also the frog is being eaten by the snake, the grasshopper is being eaten by the frog, grasshopper eats the grasses. So a chain, there is a chain going on, and this is the food chain which is present in this ecosystem. So there are these different tropic levels. So each sequence or the link in this food chain, or one sequence in the food chain, is called a tropic level or the food level. So we have different food levels or tropic levels, like the first tropic level, the second tropic level, the third tropic level, the fourth tropic level, and the fifth tropic level. So this chain or the sequence or the link in the food chain is called a tropic level or a food level, and the kind of organisms, as you can see in this chart. Now the first tropic level as seen in this chart, that is the grasses are the first tropic level, and they are the primary producers. You call them as the primary producers. Then you have the grasshoppers. They are at the second tropic level, and they are considered as the primary consumers because they are consuming the grasses. So they become the consumers. The grasses are the producers because they can manufacture their own food from the sunlight. From the sunlight they develop, or they are able to photosynthesize, they are able to manufacture their own food. So the grasses are considered as the primary producers, and it occupies the first tropic level, while the grasshoppers, they are considered as the second tropic level because they are consuming the grasses, they eat the grasses, and so they are considered as the primary consumers. In the third tropic level lies the frogs, as you can see in the chart. So there are a number of chain of this chain or link in the ecosystem. This is one example which is one of the simplest examples of a food chain. So in the third tropic level, you can see the frog, and the frog is considered as a secondary consumer because it is consuming or it is eating the grasshopper, and the grasshopper in turn is eating the grasses. So the frog becomes the secondary consumer, and it is at the third trophic level. So the trophic level is the sequence or the link in the food chain as already discussed. The snake lies in the fourth trophic level, and they are considered as the tertiary consumers. The snake is at the fourth trophic level and are considered as the tertiary consumers. The vultures are at the last level of the tropic level in this particular food chain. They are considered as the quaternary consumers. So in a food chain, there are different tropic levels, starting from one tropic level to the second tropic level, the third tropic level, fourth and fifth tropic level. And this chain or the link is the kind of organisms are depicted or designated as primary producers, primary consumers, secondary consumers, tertiary consumers and quaternary consumers. So when these organisms consume or eat another organism, now they derive the energy. The energy flow is actually unidirectional from the lower tropic level to the higher tropic level. So in the previous chart, you have seen that these different tropic levels, from the grass to the fifth tropic level, that is the vulture. So the energy flow is unidirectional from the lower tropic level to the higher tropic level. So the highest tropic level in this particular food chain are the vultures, and the lowest tropic level in this particular food chain are the grasses. So the energy flows from the grasses to the vultures. So during this transfer of energy or the flow of energy from the grasses to the vultures, a lot of energy is being lost as heat. So only a small fraction of the energy, that is about 10%, goes to the next tropic level. So the grasses, although it is able to manufacture its own food, now the energy which flows from the grasses to the grasshopper reduces as the food chain goes on from the lower tropic level to the higher tropic level. So only 10% or a small fraction of the energy goes to the next tropic level. The quantity of energy decreases at a rapid rate from the primary producers to the top consumers. So in the previous chart, we have seen that the grasses, these are the primary consumers. So the primary consumers, the quantity of energy decreases at a rapid rate from the primary producers to the top consumers. This is the reason why food chain have fewer links, since it is not able to support the next tropic level. So a food chain will have fewer links since the quantity of energy decreases, so it is not able to support the next tropic level, and hence the food chain have fewer links. In nearly all the natural ecosystems, the consumers have more than one food source, resulting in the branching of the food chain, which gives us a picture of who consumes whom. So in the natural ecosystem, like you have the pond ecosystem, the forest ecosystem, the desert ecosystem, all the consumers will have more than one food source, which will result in the branching of the food chain and will give us an idea of who consumes whom. We now come to the next topic, that is the food web. As we have already discussed about the food chain, now next comes the food web. Now the food web, what does the food web illustrate? It will show us the feeding relationship among the species within a community, how they interact with each other and how they are interdependent with each other, the dynamics of the energy transfer in an ecosystem. So the food web will tell you or illustrate you the feeding relationship among the species. When a consumer has various food sources, the linear food chain becomes interlinked to form a food web. It gives a complete picture of who consumes whom in an ecosystem. The food web represents transfer of energy and nutrients among the organisms, while the food chain represents only one pathway or one strand of the food web. So this is the difference between a food chain and a food web. In a food chain, it will show you just one pathway or one strand of the food web. But in a food web, the transfer of energy and nutrients are among organisms within an ecosystem. So there is a branching and it forms a web among the organisms. In a food web, many species can occupy more than one trophic level, known as multi-level consumers or omnivores. For example, the humans. So the humans, they can occupy many trophic levels, not a single trophic level, but many trophic levels, and they are known as the multi-level consumers or the omnivores. So the humans, as we all know, the humans eat the plants also, the humans eat animals also. So in the food web, the species, many species can occupy more than one trophic level. The humans, they consume food derived from the plants, and they are the primary consumers. You can call the humans as primary consumers also, and when they are the primary consumers, they occupy the second trophic level. And when they consume the animal products, then they occupy the third or the higher level. So the humans, or for example any species, they can occupy more than one trophic level, known as the multi-level consumers or the omnivores. How an organism such as man can occupy different trophic level. Man occupies the second trophic level also. It can also occupy the third trophic level. It can occupy the fourth trophic level also. It can occupy the fifth trophic level also. For example, in the first one, you have the wheat is eaten by the rats. The rat is being eaten by the snake. The snake is being eaten by a peacock, and the peacock is being eaten by man. Man occupies the highest trophic level, and it is at the fifth trophic level. In the second case, you have the plants, they are being eaten by insects. The insects are being eaten by hen, and the hen is eaten by man. So man occupies the fourth trophic level in comparison to the first one, where man occupies the fifth trophic level, or humans occupy the fifth trophic level. In the third case, the humans or man is occupying the third trophic level, where it eats where the grasses are eaten by the goat is being eaten by man. And in the fourth case, you have man eats the wheat. So this chain, this food chain, you can see a wheat, from the wheat to rat to snake to peacocks and man. The food chain, again the plants, insects, hen, man, grass, goat, man, and wheat and man. So one organism can occupy different trophic levels. So after going through this unit or this chapter, we should be able to define what is a food chain, what is a food web, and what is a trophic level. What are the types of food chain? How is the food chain different from the food web? And the flow of energy in an ecosystem. Thank you.